remarkable guest will open our program today. Daria Krivonos is CEO of Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. She has a background in strategic risk management across multiple sectors. In her current role, she combines her natural curiosity in global dynamics with trends and scenario analysis when scanning the horizon for potential societal and business implications. She has co-authored reports on topics such as geopolitics, future of global trade, transformation of trust, and sustainability. She firmly believes that managing short-term risks and looking beyond the immediate planning horizon are equally essential approaches to maneuvering an organization through the uncertainties of the future. Daria will take us into her perspective of the future of sustainable prosperity of the region. Daria Krivonos.
Thank you. That is quite an introduction. Sometimes maybe I should have ChatGPT write my introduction going forward. I think the gentleman on the stage just before me, I think you highlighted very well that an emotional response is actually what triggers people's attention and whether or not they're going to remember what you said. So as much as I appreciate the formal version, I'm going to talk about emotions today, and I'm going to talk about emotions and our response to change, how we act in the face of uncertainty. And I'm going to do that, of course, from where I am today, which is I'm with the Institute for Future Studies. We are 54 years old. We're a very old institution. But I also come out of the corporate sector. I spent 10 years working for conglomerates. I've been on the other side of decision-making, investments, boards, leadership teams, and I've seen how very, very smart people make very poor long-term decisions, not because they're not smart enough, not because they don't have the expertise, but because they do it with a gut feeling and because they respond with a knee-jerk reaction. So we respond to change in ways that may not be the best solutions for the future. I also appreciate very much that when we talk about sustainability today, it's not just climate and environment, which are very, very important pillars of sustainability, but it's you need to create a sustainable society, which basically means a society that can sustain itself, so it's stable, it has room for innovation, it has room for focus, for long-term thinking, because when you have the opposite, something that is unsustainable, it's unstable, it's short-termism, it's populism, it's poor decisions, and it's a very poor outcome in the end. So, I have 23 minutes with you, and I'm going to provide full information fire hose, so buckle up. I often start with our logo, and the reason I do that is because when we translate ourselves into English just a couple of years ago, we made a point of underlying the futures of plural. So we put futures studies. It's not a misspell. It's a very, very conscious decision to emphasize the fact that there's multiple futures. What do I mean by that? Well, I started my keynotes recently with this piece of art. It's somewhere in a museum, but basically it says, let's do this mental exercise and go back to 2010. So start 2010, we were all here. I can look by the demographics. Most of us were grown-ups in 2010. And just think about what will you imagine for 2023, just 2010. And then think about what has happened in 2023 that you did not imagine. So if I'm 2010, and we already have a range, right? What we imagined that didn't really happen and what did happen that we didn't imagine. So you already have a range, which means you already have these multiple futures. Now let's fast forward, and now I'm 2023. And all of us in this room are imagining something for 35. And already there's going to be a 35 that we did not imagine. So in that range, we already have multiple futures, which also means that plans are important, investment decisions are important, building infrastructure is important, but doing it based on one vision for the future is almost guaranteed you're building wrong. You're planning wrong because there's just no way either one of us in this room can imagine the actual future that will happen. So please keep an open mind. If you take away anything from my 23 minutes is do keep an open mind in terms of how to embrace change and how we go about it. I'll get more concrete, don't worry. The way we do this, when I met the Institute, I was on the customer side, so I was with this big corporate, and we invited them in because we were looking at investments that were going to be 20 years in our books, 30 years in the world, etc. So we realized that short-term thinking was not an option. And then they came in and they had these business cards that said Futurist. And, you know, I was the first one to make a joke, like, do you share this business card with fortune tellers? Because what are futurists anyway? And then they really challenged the way we think. So the way we go about the future now is, of course, we start with the megatrends. And the megatrends, I sometimes compare them to the Sustainable Development Goals. The reason I do that is because we have 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Very few of us, maybe someone in this room, maybe not, can mention all 17. And it's not because they're not important. But let's be honest and say they're not equally important. They're not equally distributed. We're not going to address them at the same time and speed. We're not going to invest the same. They're correlated. They're imperfect in every way, but they're a framework that means everyone, every corporate, every region, every authority, everyone can work with sustainability because suddenly you have a structure. You have these small pictograms. You have these pictures and you have these cubes you can put in your reception. You have the Sustainable Development Goals. The same goes for megatrends. They're imperfect. They're super correlated. They're not going to impact the whole world at the same time, but they're a framework. So it's things like globalization, it's urbanization, it's aging, it is that we are focused on our health, it's the biotech revolution, it's the AI, automation, concentration of wealth is one we added recently to say that we have business models now with the tech companies that make tech companies bigger than GDPs of whole countries. So concentration of wealth is a new megatrend. They're not perfect, they're fully correlated, they're not equally weighted, but they will be here for 10 to 15 years and they're going to impact the entire globe, but maybe not at the same time. Then you can argue, wait a minute, did you say globalization? And yes, I did. Globalization is probably the megatrend that is challenged the most right now. So under every megatrend, we have the uncertainties. And the uncertainties are these trends, forces, pushing and pulling megatrends out of their trajectories. Globalization, for now, remains a megatrend because it's basically the sum of people, finance, and goods that travel across the globe, and they're still rising. But you can't go to a conference anymore without discussing deglobalization, reshoring, friendshoring, and all of that. So uncertainties will be there for each and every one of these, and should they get strong enough, we're going to have to change the megatrends. Then underneath every uncertainty and megatrend, we also have the black swans, the unexpected events. And there's a good reason why my black swan is actually transparent, because I think we black swans are being confused with a completely different species, which is a scapegoat. And I think we're blaming the black swans for many, many things we refuse to see in time. So there's usually many precursors to things that we ignore, and then we call it a black swan. So for me, they're transparent because I believe the term is being abused. The reason we have these pitfalls is because you have cognitive biases, and that's what I'm going to talk about, for starters. I may be a little bit bold, but I'm not going to be here all day, so I'll take the bet anyway. If there's anyone in this room who does not recognize yourself in one of these 5 biases I'm going to show now, be brave, be honest, raise your hand, and I'll buy you a coffee or a drink, depending on the time of day. Okay? And I will deliver, I promise. Let's go from the beginning. So the first cognitive bias we run into when we work with future and uncertainty is we believe change is bad for business. It is a gut feeling reaction. When something is changing, we respond by opposing it, or denying it, or hoping that things are going to go back to normal. This is a very emotional response. I told you I'm going to talk about emotions, but in a very concrete way. And it doesn't matter how important you are, how senior you are, maybe even the more senior, the more you're prone to this bias because you don't want things to change. You already made a plan. Change means adaptation. Adaptation means energy consumption, and maybe it's in our human nature to reduce consumption of energy. So status quo, something changes, we respond by thinking, wait a minute, things will go back to normal, the next generation will be like us, everything is going to be the same, don't worry. Then at some point we give in to change and say, fine, change is happening, what are we going to do about it? And paradoxically, we take a game plan from before and we try to apply it again. So a second response we have to change is, why don't we do what we've always done at a time where nothing is the same? So by the time we're done with these 2 biases, we've wasted a lot of time, we've exposed ourselves to risks, and we've foregone opportunities that our competition or somebody else is already looking at. Then there's the great bias, and I think in the name of innovation, This is a good one, because this is where we have ideas. This is where we wake up in the morning, we want to change the world. This is where my idea is so great, it cannot possibly fail. Sometimes we end up building parts of cities, talent programs, innovation programs, municipality plans, etc., based on sitting in a room with similar people deciding something is a great idea, and then we don't know why it's not a success, why it reaches reality. Then we ask the experts. And I used to be an expert, so I'm an economist by training. I did economics for 10 years in different capacities. Now I'm a flexpert, which is a good name for a generalist. But we go to experts for advice, and we always should, but we have to remember what they're experts in, because what experts don't know is what they don't know. And it sounds a little bit like a banality, but if it's a true anecdote, and I don't know if it is, so you give NASA engineers the task of coming up with a pen that works in zero gravity. And they spend every mental capacity they have to come up with a pen for zero gravity. And at some point, a gentleman sweeping the floor comes by and says, "Why don't you use my pencil?" Right? So engineers, doctors, whoever we are, economists, we're going to be looking for a solution within what we know. So always ask experts, but remember what is it they're experts in. Last but not least, the groupthink fallacy. This is a very dangerous one because it's so comfortable. This is the frictionless, seamless decision-making. This is very correlated with Friday afternoons, good weather, bad weather, because you want to go home either way, and you feel so good about the decision you made, except the more comfortable you feel, the worse it was the decision. This is where it's so convenient that we all think the same. I've made it a rule at the Institute that if we agree too soon on something very complex, it means either someone is lying or someone is missing. Sometimes it's both. So if you're discussing something complex and you reach a decision very quickly, stay in the room. Ask who has kept their mouth shut. Ask if there's something you're missing. Ask for ways to kill your idea, and don't leave before you've done that. Do I owe anyone a drink? All right, if you're shy, find me later. The way we work with the future is we would do things like this, or we would work with organizations, or how I met the Institute when they joined us. No secret, I was with Maersk, the big shipping company. We also had oil manufacturing. We had many things. And we invited them in for a whole day, and we went to a beautiful venue like this one, just out in the countryside, and we said, let's talk about the future. And the first thing we did is that we went straight to the left of the triangle. And we discussed the present very much, like what is changing, what is happening in the world. I know you guys are doing that as well. You have a lot of changes you need to address right now. So we spend a lot of time on the left of the triangle. Then at some point, we would urge them along and say, okay, we're here to discuss the future, let's do this. And they go straight to the right. And we start discussing history. History is important. History is extremely important for your region. What I've read about your region, the little I've got to see, and everything I know about the regional history broader for the last 30 years or so, you guys have a lot of history, for better or worse. You have a lot of assets in your history. You have a cultural heritage. You have a brand now. So history is important, but it's also an anchor. It's a very, very heavy anchor we drop, and we start dragging with us for the rest of the day as we want to discuss the future. The good news is we never get to the future, because by the time people are done with the bottom of the triangle, it's time for lunch, then it's walk and talk, then there's Pilates on the lawn, and then there's whiskey tasting, and we see you guys for dinner. So it never becomes an issue. The problem is we never even discuss the future. Not at all. So I would urge you today, throughout the day, and maybe take it with you for later, start with the top. Because the future you will be looking into will unfold in the tension, in the friction point between these three. There will be things in the present you need to solve. There will be things from history that either tie you down or give you a steering direction. But there is also a pull from the future. And the best way to talk about the future is maybe, if you really want to be ambitious, think about a child, your own child or a child you know, and then imagine them having your age today. And then just imagine one day in their lives. Imagine a random Wednesday morning. What do they wake up to? Did they have kids of their own? Because we're painting a very dystopian future. Who did they have children with? How many partners? How many parents? Did they do it by themselves? At some point, if they do have kids, what do they live in? Do they still own anything? Because young people today either can't afford or don't want to be tied down. What does it mean for the investment community if people don't own anything anymore? What does it mean for banking, for insurance? What is on their breakfast table? Do we still have animal protein? Do we have milk, butter, cheese? If not, and you're in dairy, then you can leave now and redo your strategy. Do we have global brands? Do you have Kellogg's on your table? If not, that means globalization is not here anymore, right? So we have mega trends in all of this: sustainability, food revolution, globalization, family formation. As much as this is just a story I'm telling you, there's a mega trend in every step of the way. At some point, they will, you know how kids are in the morning, they change their mind 10 times before they finish breakfast, you throw out half the oatmeal, and suddenly there's something going up on the wall saying, you just wasted 100 grams of oatmeal, your carbon credit is now lower, you have to bike to work. Oh, do you go to work? Do they go to work at all? Do they go to a physical space? What does your city look like if people don't go to work anymore? Or if they don't move all of them in the morning and then back in the evening? Because mobility and infrastructure is not a destination. It's a mean. And it's a mean to move people from A to B at a certain time of day. So you need to ask yourself, who are these people? Why are they going there? What is A? Where is B? And when are they going there for what? Because before that, you can't make any infrastructure plans. You can't build a city. You can't place your next hospital. Do you need a hospital if we can treat people at home? So let's say they do go to work, and then what do they do for work? What is the consumption when these kids have grown up? What services do they consume? What physical products? Where are they produced? Did they spend 5 years in university and then work for 6 decades with that knowledge only? Because that's what we do now, right? We spend 5 years in university and then we work for 50 years using that knowledge. Have we really embraced lifelong learning? Do you have to go to your boss and say, can I please, as a bonus, go to this course? Or did we actually learn to invest in people as if they were engineering machinery? People are the biggest asset we have. So maybe it's not a bonus to take a course, maybe it's part of the maintenance, etc., etc. So before you've done this exercise, before you've considered what's important to them, what is their day like, where are they going, why, what do they do, what is their schooling, what is on the agenda for the public municipalities? Is it mental health? Is it still climate? Is it loneliness? Is it because we implemented automation so soon that people lost anything to do, so we need to have universal basic income? Because AI is only a year old for us, and this is what we've done already. So please, next time you discuss the future, start with the top of the triangle. What does it mean for your region? What is a sustainable society when these kids have your age? This is done for you. So this was done in 1950. Someone imagined the life in 2000. And this is an American magazine. And you can quickly notice quite an amazing imagination, right? You have something that looks like an iPad on the right. You have a flat screen TV in color in the privacy of a home. You have microwave, etc., etc. You still have dad coming home from work. You have mom in the kitchen. You have grandpa smoking next to the kids. So as much as we often imagine technology, every time I say the future, people go like flying cars, self-driving vehicles, cyborgs, robots. Anyone with a pacemaker is a cyborg. They're here. Just forget it. You're living in the age of sci-fi. Let's talk about the important stuff. What we missed here is that mom did go to work. That means any highway you were building at this time, any urban planning you were building around this family structure to live for 50 years, you failed. Your schools are not in the right place. Your daycare is non-existent because she's at home. Your streets are too narrow for 2 people to go to work at the same time. So what happens in the softer fabric of society, the sustainable society that can sustain itself in balance, actually happens between humans. Technology is just a force multiplier. I'm exempting AI because AI will be one of these revolutionary technologies. For the rest of it, technology is the cherry on the top. This is sometimes the way we plan. So this is a bridge which was built in Honduras in the 90s. And it was a Japanese engineering firm, and they did everything right. So they calculated, of course, they calculated the structure, they simulated every weather event, they did the materials, and they built this bridge. A few years go by, and just a couple of years later, it's actually hit by a typhoon, a very, very serious typhoon. And they could go back, and to their great success, I guess, testimony to their success, say that the bridge structure withstood the typhoon, except the river had moved. Why am I mentioning this? Well, first of all, given the climate changes we're seeing, perhaps this is a good time to reconsider whether you should build modular bridges. I mean, there's a literal interpretation to this picture, but there's also the decisions we make now. Are you guys, and I'm talking about those of you who are making long-term decisions, are you building bridges over rivers that are already moving? Are you finishing bridges over rivers that maybe have moved? Be it citizens of Brno, the composition of age, what are the desires for future worlds, what are the desires for future of education, but you're so busy building this bridge because you have the materials, you have the structure, you have the budget, you even have the decision from the authorities to do this, that you don't want to look down and see maybe the river is moving. Because this would be a good time to stop and reconsider. Maybe the river has increased. Maybe the trend you're trying to address is actually only working even more in your favor, but you're still very busy working on the design that you have. So whether it's a decision, whether it's a program to attract young people, whether it's something else, please be honest with yourself, check the biases, look inside your decisions, look at your blueprints, and see whether you have some of these bridges on your desk and you're only looking for progress rather than rediscovery. Because what we do is we make decisions, paradoxically, we make decisions today about tomorrow based on yesterday. So we make a lot of, and trust me, I've done this for 10 years, I've built these models, but models are built on historical data, and historical data can be dangerous, and I'm going to give you an example. I know there's a saying that the devil is in the details. For me, the devil is in the assumptions, and what I mean by that is 1961, we go to space. The first person goes to orbit and comes back alive. It's an engineering feat. What happens then is we keep investing. We have the battle between communism, capitalism, East, West. So there's a lot of prestige, there's a lot of military security writing. Then we have more brains go into this, new satellites, and only 8 years later, humans land on the moon, first footprint. 8 years. This is an exponential development. If I was an economist and I'd say, okay, I have this data set. If this is going to continue, I'm buying a little piece of land on Mars because there's going to be a great sunset, it's cheap right now, and this is where we're going. This is the obvious thing to do for 8 years. A few months ago, Russia had a Luna 25 vehicle that crashed into the surface of the moon. Luna 24 was in the 1970s. My assumptions were wrong, not the details. My assumptions were wrong. Everything I assumed to continue did not. Soviet Union fell apart, they lost their space program, NASA lost public support. We haven't been to the moon for 50 years, let alone Mars. So there's a very big danger in assuming things. So next time you have a plan and you have a goal and a destination and you can imagine the way things are going to be, I told you, you're imagining a future that probably will not happen already, park that and then discuss 3 things. What needs to be true in this scenario? In this world that I'm painting, where I can see all of these young people coming to my region, where I can see we grow as the Silicon Valley of Europe, which you are, and I think you guys are an extremely important region in this. You have a role to play. Europe has basically no technological leadership anymore. You guys can make a difference. But what needs to be true? There's usually 3 categories. What needs to happen? Some change needs to happen. What needs to not happen? What obstacles have to not happen for you to succeed? And what actually needs to go backwards? So in every decision we make, in every strategy we paint, in every vision we have, there is always going to be these 3 categories that we somehow assume to be true. Some things will change, the way we want them, of course. Some things will stay the same. Maybe, we're assuming that the next generation is going to be motivated as we are, they will have kids, whatever it is. We're making assumptions about things that will stay the same. Just note the absurdity in that assumption. And the last thing is we're assuming some things will actually regress. And in that, we create a perfect world for our idea. So please, destinations, visions, strategies, they're all important, but rather than that, discuss what needs to be true. If this is the one sentence you take with you today, next time you're sitting in one of these rooms, sit down and write down the assumptions that you're making, that all need to happen in the right order for you to have this little piece of land and a summer house on Mars, because we're not there. So I guess my final remarks would be that everyone in this room, we have a footprint. And that means everything we do on a daily on a daily basis, we leave a footprint, whether it's carbon, whether it's the way we vote, whether it's the interactions, the dialogues we have. Just by being and waking up every morning and going about our day, we leave a footprint, right? This is a little bit passive, but it's there. Then we have the handprint, and this is why we're in this room, because these are the things we intentionally want to change. This is where I would like to envision something different, put my hand on it, and change it. So footprint, the passive one, handprint, the proactive one, and then the blueprint. And the blueprint for me is having the audacity, the courage to step outside your field of expertise and take part in the conversation for a bigger blueprint, for the region, for the planet, however ambitious you feel. Step outside of being an engineer and say, maybe we should look at the health sector in a completely different way, because oftentimes your idea will be better than those who've been doing it their entire lives because they're locked into a thinking. So, beware of your footprint. Be ambitious about your handprint. And then have the courage to take part in the conversations of a very different blueprint for the region and, if you will, for the world. Thank you.
Daria Krivonos, Copenhagen Institute of Future Studies. And now we dreamed a little bit, and let's go down on Earth, on a very specific place on Earth that is called the South Moravian region. And we will continue with a panel discussion with our esteemed panel of experts. So, dear panelists, after I call your name, please come here on stage and take your seat here next to Daria. First, I'd like to introduce Daniel Prokop, sociologist and founder of PAQ Research, leading Czech NGO analyzing data for improving public services and quality of life. Welcome and take a seat. Another panelist is Ondráš Přibyla, CEO of Facts on Climate Change, a team of independent analysts and experts with an aim to cultivate Czech debate on climate change. Welcome as well. And you have already met Governor of the South Moravian region and a big friend of AI, Jan Grolich. Welcome. And Daria Krivonos, CEO of Copenhagen Institute of Future Studies, will join us for a discussion as well. There are microphones, so if you will speak, please use these microphones. Well, we heard about a lot of visions and emotions and also some mega trends mentioned. So if you imagine the future for your own kids here in South Moravia, which megatrends do you consider as the biggest threat for the future of sustainable region here in South Moravia? Not an easy question, so I will pick Ondráš to start with a discussion.
Okay, there is a trap in imagining. What I like about your speech is it opens the mind by many questions. What is a trap in saying this is the one image, is in the singular. You spoke about futures. We need to speak about futures. So what are the threats and what are the possible futures, possible megatrends that can change this region? Well, the things I am biased to see are related either to climate change or the transition to net zero economy. And I kind of don't see the others. So I would be very curious what would Dan Prokop say on the other hand. What would the people who speak for the education part say? And I would love to have the discussion and speak about futures and threats, not in the way that we would grab them and hold them, but in the way that would provide us maps for action without needing to hold to one future. Does it make sense?
Daria, would you like to comment on this,
Sure.
follow-up
to
your debate, to your keynote?
Oh, it still works. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I think now I have to be an optimist, right? I work with the future every day, and often when I leave the stage, people come to me and say, "Oh my God, I'm so worried now," which is a mistake because I'm not here to scare anybody. I need to, and I will get back to the threats, but I think there's one thing that we need to remember: we are the only species on the planet that can imagine things we haven't seen, right? As far as we know. We're also the only species on the planet who can convey this to others, whether drawing, verbally, writing down. Why I'm saying that is because the future hasn't happened. The future is a story we tell each other. It also means that the one with the most compelling story is the one who is going to impact the future. And I'm not here to say that if just I stop eating meat, we're going to solve the world, but there is a truth to the fact that if we all engage in the future proactively, we can actually change it. Having said that, the biggest threats to that picture would be, first of all, for me, as much as I'm also great believer in that we need to do something about climate, I think right now we're looking at a world where polarization is a big risk. And I don't mean just polarization east-west, China, north part of the hemisphere. It's also rural versus urban. It is AI digitally literate to those who are not, people who grew up with a smartphone in their hand and those who still don't know how to use the internet. It is south-west, east-north, religious, non-religious, anything. I think we have, with the technology that we have in place, I think polarization is a big risk because it's an exponential divide. That's the one, and the other one is the reaction to that from authorities is short-termism. Climate change deserves that we think long-term. Sustainable societies mean we have to think long-term. So I think the biggest threat to that is short-termism, short-term gains, and polarization.
Daniel, that sounded like something from sociology that you are very familiar with. So would you agree that this is really a great threat to the sustainability of the regions?
So I think to follow Ondráš's argument, pardon, we need to change the structure of our economy because our economy is, the energy consumption in our economy is one of the highest in Europe per GDP. And to change the structure of Czech economy and the economy of this region, you need to, by many other things, but I think is one of the most important thing, change education. Change education so we produce people who can work in different economy to do this second transition, as we call it, to economy which is not so dependent on jobs which are producing so much carbon footprint, and we have some bigger additional value in the production chains and so on. And to get back to the region of Jihomoravský kraj, there are huge differences in performance of region, in performance of schools within the region. If you compare Brno with regions like Pouchlá, it's completely incomparable results in education. And there are many obstacles in the primary education, secondary education to achieve actual human capital which can participate in this new and environmental friendly economy. So if I get back to my topic, I think we need to work on transforming and innovating Czech education and moving it to actually 21st century, because in some parts it stayed back in the 20th.
So climate change, polarization of society and education. What do you see with your biases as a politician as the main threats to the region that you are governing?
Maybe not as a politician, but as a father, because the biggest threat I feel after your keynote is that there is a possibility that our children will not have children. And it's not because of their decision or because some economical situation, but maybe because of the health, because more and more of us will not be biologically able to have kids in the future. And maybe you mentioned it, that there's the way how to produce kids and people artificially. And maybe because we can see it because of the pandemic, that it's possible that we will be so threatened by the some diseases that we will live in isolation. We will produce new people isolated, and if we will live isolated because we will be so threatened because of some disease, there will be no social connection. There will be no relationships, no families, and there will be no reason to live. Because we can discuss economy, we can discuss sustainability, we can discuss education, but it can be only a few years, and we will live in isolation with no relationships. And why are we discussing these topics? Because we want to live in this world together, not separately next to each other. And I'm afraid that if we live in such an isolation, we will not have no social relationships, we will not have no reason to live on this world. Have a nice day.
Well, that's quite depressive. I should have asked about the biggest opportunity instead of the biggest threat. I'm sorry. But Ondráš wants to react, so go ahead.
I would like to say that I don't agree. But also that the point is not to agree, but to find a way how to translate these ideas into some meaningful actions. So what will we do about it? What can we do about this? What can we do about the data from education system, difference between Pouchlá and Brno? What can we do about megatrends? What can we do about the transition? So I just want to say the point is not to agree on the threats or on the future. The point is to find a way to agree on some together coherent action.
Can I comment on some of the things? So I think, first of all, I agree with, I mean, thank you for taking the dystopian view. Now I don't have to do it. if you were ChatGPT, I'd say, now make this positive. I think, first, of course, when we look at the future in education and against this dystopian thing, we're engaged in something called Teach the Future. So we're trying to teach future studies to kids, to give them this hope, to give them this sense of agency, to remove this dark picture. Because let's be honest, this is the first generation to whom we're painting a worse future as a narrative, as a story, than ever before. It's never happened before. We had wars, we had crises, but they came suddenly and they went. It's the first time we're painting a worse future. So I understand if they're a little bit depressed. My concern with what you also mentioned, the education part, is at least I can see in the Nordics and Denmark, our response to technology has been to hold an umbrella to a tsunami. So rather than discuss how we engage AI in the curriculum already after the summer, we're discussing how do we prevent children from using AI during the exams so they cheat. This is so extremely retrospective, and this is back to my polarization point. I think we have, one of the threats that we have is we have a generational gap between those who are making rules and those who will actually live in this world. And I think the technological gap is enormous. So I think technology can help in the dystopian, it can help in the fertility stuff, and it can help in climate. But I think for as long as we sit and we look back in history, when we make the rules for something such as AI, we're missing the train, we're opening up to risks, and I think we're missing a lot of opportunities for the change.
Janne, you made note, so you probably would like to react, or is it not a good presumption?
It was note for myself, which I want to use in next political campaign. Sorry, I will not take.
Okay. Well, we have a lot of local leaders of innovation in the audience today. So what can we, as we are here, do ourselves, like the local companies? Are there some inspirational projects and initiatives that you would like to mention as an example worth following? Let's try to be specific. Ondráš?
Related to climate change and the transition to net zero economy, this is actually a hard question because 50 facilities in Czech Republic are responsible for half of the CO2 emissions. So if you are not from the 50 facilities, then you cannot make the very big impact. So saying that, I would like to focus the attention to what are the leverage points. I cannot say what are the leverage points of your company, but to understand that you need to see the value chain, you need to map the value chain, you need to also map the possible changes in the value chain within the transition and see where you can contribute. This would be company specific. It doesn't make sense to give examples, and these might be very tiny examples, like do subtle innovation that will just go on with the trend and provide you future business. That might be enough. But also, what I would highlight is the companies that don't only do the pilot projects, some piloting, some new stuff, but also try to talk about it, try to give the learnings to others. And it might be publicly guiding the visitors through your factory, which, for example, Zonentor is doing, and it's just very nice, and they are telling the story of how they can change the agriculture. Their story is not complete, and it doesn't matter. If you can share the learnings of your innovation, then you help the others to change. And I think this would be the important stuff. So Zonentor is the one example I can cite, but probably there are many others. And you are sharing it within your communities. Probably EATS is also a community where this can be shared.
Would anyone want to follow up with specific projects?
Thanks, Ondráš, because he stole my example. I wanted to point out Zonentor, for example. But I think it's important to point out the good examples. I think, and I'll be honest, that we as a politicians will always be a few steps behind entrepreneurs. So I think we should learn out of it and not only just see it and go by. So we have to be inspired, and it's our task to point out good examples and to learn out of it, because you as entrepreneurs will be, every time you will be quicker and better and more efficient, and we have to try to do at least a piece of it.
Do you agree, Daniel, because your work is a great piece of advice for people like Jan Grolich?
Well, I think the examples of innovations in social affairs, which I'm investigating or inquiring, there's many of them. We cooperate with banks on providing their clients information to navigate them towards social support. We cooperated with some private companies to making approach to the welfare support more digital, and easier for them. There's nice examples of new upcoming projects providing the AI to kids in schools. So there's my favorite example is entrepreneur from Bromov, Jan Školník, actually coordinating all the people in the region to increase innovations and some cooperation in the region, from position of being entrepreneur in the region. So there are many examples. When I thought what they have in common, I think to be successful in this sphere, you have to cooperate with the public sector, and you need actually quite strong public sector to implement the things which you pioneer. Because many of these, even the ones which I mentioned, or the other ones, their impact will be limited by some problems and obstacles in the public sector. So for example, the AI for kids, any of these innovations which are being created in Czech education, the return of investment is lower because the management of Czech schools is so disorganized. There is no management which would implement these innovations to majority of the schools. So mostly or many times these innovations kind of stop in like 20% of schools and so on. Also, so the decentralization and lack of management of Czech school system actually limits the possible impact of the private innovations in the education. Also, if you do these innovations in regions like Znojmo, where over 40% of people goes to high schools or secondary schools, which are without maturita, without this leaving exam, so you cannot follow with university, then the investment is also almost halfly, by 40% lost, because there is no supply of good quality high schools, which these good kids would use to follow up their careers and so on. So I think we should focus, or private sector should focus on these innovations, but should also focus on advocacy of changes in the public sphere to make the return of investment higher, not to lose this half of this investment by being lost in mismanagement, by not having institutions in the public sphere which would help them to implement it. So this is a big, I think, point I want to make, that we should think about innovations in the social and educational affairs as somehow being enabled by good public sector, and also advocate for the public sector to be effective to help implement these innovations.
Would someone like to react?
Maybe it's not really my place, in the sense that I'm the one on the panel least familiar with your regional specifics, but as if you allow me to stay on a more general note. Well, I think, first of all, and again, I'm not sure exactly how this plays out in the region or in your country in general, but I think in many countries, say also, I mean, Denmark, we're called the bumblebee economy, where we shouldn't be able to fly, we shouldn't flourish, we have nothing to produce, and yet it's a very rich country. So, and they pride themselves on being very innovative, and yet we have so much red tape, we have so much public, so many public obstacles, sometimes by inertia, sometimes intentionally. So I think removing the barriers is in everyone's interest, and I don't know if you have them, but just thinking, what do we want to be, what do we want to be known for in 20 years? Just, sit in your office with your colleagues and ask yourself that question. When people Google us in 20 years, assuming Google will still exist, what are we going to be known for, and how do we get there? And then go backwards and say, what are we doing now that is already not taking us in that direction? That is usually a good exercise, because if you have an ambition, you should be able to follow through yesterday. The other thing is, if you work with innovation, you look stress testing these ideas, future test them. Basically say, we usually have a saying, don't go against a mega trend. If you want to be something big, don't go against a mega trend. Of course, I know you have shops that are selling vinyl music again, but I mean vinyl and Spotify, right? So you'll have niche, but if you want to go big, test it for megatrends. And if I may step a little bit into your space, I think when we do talk about climate solution innovation, I think we need to cut the bullshit, sorry, a little bit, and know the difference between feel good and do good. Because every time you show an avocado wrapped in plastic, there's just, there's public outroar, why nature has already wrapped this fruit, berry, whatever it is by classification. Well, food waste is the third biggest polluter in the world. Every third product we produce is thrown out. So if it was a country, it would be the third biggest country to pollute in the world. Why am I saying that? Is because maybe investing in plastic is maybe a quicker way to solve some of the climate issues, because we won't throw away food. So for me, it's just an example to say, when we look for solutions, be able and be willing to be brutally honest about the problem we're trying to solve, the net effect, and the very big difference between feeling good and actually doing good, because they're often very different, because we feel good about many things, but we don't actually make a change. So that was very high level, sorry.
Well, to be specific, Daria, I will stay with you. Could you share maybe any specific example of, or a case study where this strategic foresight has been implemented, let's say in a region like Brno?
There's actually several, and they're very, very different. So, for instance, I can mention some projects that we've done, but also some by others, because it doesn't matter who does future as long as we do it. So we've done a project with Greenland, which is a very complex region, especially for Denmark, because it's old colonial territory. So there's a lot of nuances that we need to be very, very delicate with. But we've done a project with Greenland, and they were looking to build a new airport. And basically, they did a foresight study. And if we do this now, what is it going to mean in the long term? And we stress tested for all the different outcomes. So that was applied foresight for different scenarios, and we played out the futures for Greenland in each four. There's also a big project we've done in Canada for health, very, very different. Different regional implementations of their vision for the future of Canadian health, where we dared to think long term, and then we did the backcasting, saying, what does it mean today? What does it mean next year? What do we need to do to end up in these things? To mention some regions that we don't particularly work with, but I know are doing great in this. I know Groningen in Holland are very foresight focused because they're looking at a region that is growing. They're looking for new mobility, new infrastructure, new city structure in a very foresight-based manner. Finland is extremely proactive in this. They have a government board that is advising them on the future. So it's a government decision to use foresight as a tool. In a region like Tampere, smaller than you, but has the similarities that they're building up educational hubs. And they've actually managed that technology transition from universities to innovation to startups to companies. So there's actually many similar regions or examples that you can use as inspiration or visit them. Ask how they do this, because I think Finland is known for many things, except they're not always given the credit.
Jan, can you imagine such strategic foresight implemented in the governance of South Moravia?
I have to be able to, because otherwise it has no meaning to do some strategic documents if we don't follow. But it's very, very difficult to prepare these strategic documents in a right way, because as we discuss all the time, the world is changing very quickly, and it's very difficult to see what will happen in, let's say, next 10, 20, 30 or more years. So it's very difficult, and if you are a company, you have one way, and when you want to do some changes in CEOs and in leaders of the company, you decide that you do the changes. In a political way, it's a bit different, so you have to have your own way, and it can be changed several times. So it's very difficult, but we have to think this way, and we have to do the most important steps to follow the big strategy. But I'm not sure when I'm listening what is said today here that our state or our region has such a strategy. I think what I feel, it's a lack of the real strategy for our region and for our state.
Would you agree on that, Daniel, in the Republic point of view, that there is no real strategy?
I would agree with that. I think there's many, let's say, too many points of interest, too many small things which we're trying to change, and lack of some general strategy. And when there is when the politicians pretend to have a strategy, it's usually like over-specific, I think. So it shouldn't focus on, we will do microchips, we will do lithium, we will do this. It should, I think, focus on overcoming some structural problems in Czech Republic, creating better education, creating better, promoting better lifestyle, which is a big problem in Czech Republic, and will be a big problem in healthcare and so on. So I think we should focus, we should really choose 4 or 5 things to focus on, because otherwise in this world which is full of some information coming every second, I see from the advisor bureaus in the government that they are overwhelmed by the suggestions, by specific things and so on. So I think the strategy should be quite narrow in the how many topics it covers, and it shouldn't be over-specific in terms of that we want to, do microchips in 25 years or something like that, which you cannot predict, I think. It should create human capital, so the market, you can choose what is the right way, then, how to make it productive.
And it should be a good story that will bring people together and create some kind of cohesion that's to the polarization issue. But also it needs to be actionable and related to the non-existent strategy of Czech Republic related to climate change and some kind of transition plan. Or it is existent, I just don't think it's thought through and it's really meant for action. What is missing, or probably I stated it in a different way, we will never have a complete and perfect strategy and complete and perfect plan. And that should not hinder us from asking the question, what is a no-regret action today? Is there something like that? If it is, then the action needs to be taken today. We don't have to wait for a great and complete plan, because we will never have one.
I would add one more point. What is the problem with strategies in Czech Republic? I think they are over-specific in the long-term goals, as I said, the microchips and thing, and they are not specific enough in the midterm goals. So, you know, you have a goal that in 25 years you will be good in doing microchips, but you are afraid to say that you want to have 70% of kids on general high schools, which provide them with ability to go to university, you know. So you are shy and scared in the midterm goals, and you are over-specific in the long-term goals, which, you know, will be different in 5 years. So I would be more, we need more courage in the midterm goals and less specificity in the long-term goals, I would say.
Well, we have just a few minutes left, well, one to be specific. Let's try to be really specific with the key points that we should focus on here in the region to stay sustainable and to gain prosperity. And let's also think about the audience that is full of local entrepreneurs and innovators. So let's make it actionable, like what can be handled not only by governments, but also by private sector. Which let's say three maximum priorities would you pick for the sustainable future? Jan.
I think that we have to be ready for change every day, and I think that that it's our task as a region, because we establish high schools, so we have to play this role in education, because the universities should be more specific, and our education should prepare the students for a change.
Ondráš?
One for the governing part of the region, make the clean energy transition. That would mean build wind plants. South Moravian part has big potential in wind energy. One for South Moravian Innovation Center, help to share knowledge or learnings from the transition and focus on, and I will use what you said, focus on not just feel good, but do good things. There are many companies that don't need to change a thing, and they are sustainable already because they are doing something in the virtual world where the sustainability means just the cloud being powered by renewable energy. But there are other parts of business that need to be changed a lot, I mean, completely. So focus innovation there, focus learning there. I can't come up with the third one.
You can save another one for...
I think the priorities, Ondráš and others already mentioned them, and I would talk about education again, you know. But I think it would be good goal, midterm goal, let's say, or short-term goal maybe, for government to create actually a better environment for the innovations. Because if you are a company, and maybe you have some experience in this, to invest in research and development, for example, in Czech Republic, it's sometimes it's a risky business because you don't know if you can deduce it from taxes and so on. It's like unclear. So I think, for example, creating good full or fast expensing schemes where the companies can invest in research and development and are sure what are the eligible investments, what are not eligible investments, would kind of like motivate more and more private sector to invest in research and development and changing economy. And if this is paired with innovating education, I think that's, for example, two ways which can cooperate on making clever economy, more green economy.
Ondráš signaled that he has his last third point. So please, 20 seconds.
Make a clear plan and communicate it. This can connect people.
And last but not least, our keynote speaker has a chance to sum it up.
I'll try, and I'll stay brief. So first of all, and I'll repeat it, but you said key points. So look at the megatrends. I mean, this is, again, are you solving a problem that would also be there 10 years from now? The second part is, don't confuse innovation with improvement. A smart refrigerator is still just a refrigerator. So this is where the long term comes in. Do not confuse incremental improvement with true innovation. Let's not kill the word by inflating it. And the last thing is, be honest with yourself as a region. And here I mean, what are you good at? If you're good at something and you're the best, keep growing, right? Do everything you can. If you're good at something, but someone is a little bit better, but you still want to be the best, invest even more. But if you really want to be something, but you have nothing to start with, you either let go and follow, or you take away all your energy from everything else and go for something you have no chance in winning. So be honest with yourself. What is your starting point? What is the gap between where you are and where you want to go? How much of it is policy? How much of it is investment? And how much of it is education? Those are the three things that make innovation: brains, money, and no red tape. Right? So be honest and sometimes let go and follow if you're not the best.
Thank you very much. An applause for our panelists, Daria Krivonos, Daniel Prokop, Ondráš Přibyla, Jan Grolich.